Okay, so good afternoon everybody and welcome back to the DNA Learner Engagement page. I've got Vicki Simpson Price with me again here, and I'm Carolyn, part of the Learner Engagement team. So some of you may have already seen Vicki's video from a couple of weeks ago when she looked at resilience and the study methods, and remember our Pomodoro method to learn to chunk things down to help you with your studies. So Vicki's back today with another brand new session for us, and this one is about emotional intelligence. So as usual guys, you can put your comments in any questions in the comments section, or if there's any burning issues later you can message us and we'll get it all passed on to Vicki. But in the meantime I'm going to hand over to you, Vicki.
Thank you very much. Just before I pull up the presentation, just to kind of give you an idea on emotional intelligence, it's one of those things that's incredibly difficult to measure. It really depends on the person, situation, environment, etc. It's actually well known for being actually quite intangible. But generally what I'm actually going to discuss is the difference today between emotional intelligence and what we've always known as IQ, or the actual intelligence scale. But I'm going to obviously discuss with you essentially how emotional intelligence potentially develops as we grow. So we're going to move into that aspects of things and go through behaviours and actual things that we can do on a day-to-day basis that can certainly help our, develop our emotional intelligence. I'm going to certainly also give you a breakdown as to someone who sits high in the emotional scale, generally what they do and what they can do on a day-to-day basis, and what they do given situations. Emotional intelligence, in a nutshell, essentially helps you work positively within a working academic and personal life stance. Okay, and it's again another buzzword or buzzwords that are being used. But essentially, just to explain to you, we're going to be going through what actually emotional intelligence is today, and just to obviously make you aware as well that it's a critical factor that sets star performers apart from the rest of the pack. Believe it or not, 90% of top performers have high emotional intelligence. So I'm going to pull up the presentation now. Okay, so we're going to discuss, first of all, the 5 elements of emotional intelligence. But what we're going to be covering today, particularly, is the development, as I've said before, a brief discussion on how emotional intelligence develops as we age. So there is going to be a little bit of theory in there, okay? And then obviously what it is, EI, the 5 elements. And we're going to go through some did you know facts and low versus high intelligence. So you actually understand and you start to gain a really good underpinning of what it is. We're then going to discuss the behaviours. Somebody who has what we would arguably say a high emotional intelligence factor, and the behaviours that they very well may present. The 5 skills to try and develop it and how you can increase it. And then obviously we'll finish off with any questions if there is. So just a little bit of theory for you. The development of emotional intelligence. There were studies done by a gentleman called Piaget and a gentleman called Kohlberg many, many years ago. They were actually interested particularly on how young children develop, specifically within their sense of morality and their sense of value and being within the world. Essentially, what they'd suggested and said is that our sense of self is naturally very egocentric to begin with. So when we're young, we're less likely to want to share our toys, for instance. It's very much of what I want and what I need at that time. Often if you see a toddler having an absolute paddy in the middle of a supermarket, it's because they can't understand that they have to wait to get back to the car to get a drink of juice. They want a drink of juice now. It's a very egocentric state. Arguably, adults will often fall into this egocentric state. It will be very much what they want, how they want it, and when they want it. And generally, it is one of those things. It's a certain type of state that we fall in and out of regularly. Thinking of oneself without regard for others, as it's say. But actually, we also have to have some form of an egocentric state in order to look after ourselves and to make sure that we're okay and we've got enough self-care. Now, as we mature, and certainly this is where Kohlberg had come in, as we mature, we begin to develop something called theory of mind. He suggested that actually we really should develop theory of mind around the age of 7. And that ability to understand what others have, beliefs, perspectives. In other words, we begin to understand and empathise with others. We're able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes for just a moment. So a 7-year-old going around the supermarket would be stomping and saying, I want a drink of juice now and I'm not willing to wait. They'll be able to reason with their parents and say, well, yeah, maybe it's not best time. I'll wait till I get back to the car, if that makes sense. But essentially, arguably as well, I have actually worked with young children, much younger than the age of 7, that have mind. I've seen 18-month-olds that have theory of mind. Mum drops something or dad drops something on the floor and the child say whoopsie daisy and pick it up and hand it back to their parent. So arguably again, theory of mind can come in at any point, at any stage. But just to make you understand that emotional intelligence is something that is a development, okay? And it's a development essentially from day one. It's not something we're born with, but it is something that we begin to develop based on our experiences, input from parents, situational factors, and essentially what we think and what we hold about ourselves, if that gives you a better understanding. And I obviously explained to you there. Theory of mind is also known as TOM, okay? But yes, certainly adults can regress to ego states as well. So, what actually is emotional intelligence? As you can see there, we've got the kind of 5 elements, okay? So we have self-awareness, that ability to recognise your own feelings, motivation, being able to find some form of focus and stay with it. Certainly, when I discussed the Pomodoro methods, or POM as wanted to call, actually that's a type of method that you could use to stay focused, which allows you to have heightened emotional intelligence. Social skills, being able to handle your relationships around you. To be entirely honest with you, given this pandemic, social skills isn't something that we've actually readily been doing or practicing on a regular basis. However, being able to be social and handling those type of relationships around us and handling and holding them well is a sign of emotional intelligence. There's that word empathy. So Tom, this is where my mind is, understanding, but more importantly, responding to others. So we understand and we choose the correct response. Sometimes a response isn't required at all. Sometimes it's just listening, okay? For instance, if I could say to you, emotional intelligence, someone with high emotional intelligence would be able to regulate their, understand if it's okay to tell someone that you feel angry with them at that point, and also recognize perhaps you need to walk away. So it's about self-regulation, regulating your emotions. Same with stress, the same with anxiety. And again, I move to the elements of if you need to speak to someone, how do you regulate your anxiety? Can you speak to someone who asks for help? Did you sleep the night before? All of the daily things, the breakdown comes down to being able to manage your emotions. That is actually emotional intelligence. Arguably, someone had said that 80% actually of us is emotional intelligence. The other 20 is IQ, which is quite an interesting statistic. Now, people with good, high emotional intelligence and average IQs, okay, which is most of us, outperform those with the highest IQs 70% of the time. So in other words, if you have good to high emotional intelligence, irregardless of what your IQ measurement is, you will outperform those consistently all the time, okay? So those 5 elements, if you're showing self-awareness, motivation, social skills, empathy, being able to regulate your emotions, you will genuinely outperform because you're managing your emotions and feelings. You could have an IQ of 160, but genuinely, if you can't manage your emotions, you're not going to be able to show that very well. This anomaly threw actually a massive wrench into the broadly held assumption that IQ was all singing, all dancing. If you've got an high IQ, then that must mean that. you're a better person, or you're someone who can control things and manage things better. And that was the sole source of success. Absolutely not. You have a PhD, but if you've got poor emotional intelligence, you're going to really struggle to be able to have good forms of motivation, social skills, self-awareness, empathy, and self-regulation. Decades of research have now pointed to emotional intelligence as being a critical factor that sets star performers aside from the rest of the pack. Okay, and as I said before, there's that statistic: 90% of top performers, so that's meeting work, academic, personal life goals, all have high emotional intelligence. Okay, it's certainly something that if you want to succeed and you want to start moving forward in life, yes, okay, you may have actively been able to sit a big exam and get a really high score on it. But again, if you have poor social skills, you struggle to regulate yourself, you struggle with people, and you're not self-aware, you're going to struggle to actually meet your work, academic, or personal life goals. However, emotional intelligence is very difficult to pin down and very, very difficult to measure. Okay, it can be applied situationally, environmentally wise, and obviously from a personal perspective. And it really depends on the person, where they're at, what they're doing, situations that's kind of happened to them, historical factors, the list goes on. So, to give you a bit of an idea with low versus high EQ, okay, not IQ, EQ. So, low emotional intelligence. Someone who really struggles with their emotional intelligence will have a tendency to be a bit more aggressive, a bit more demanding, a bit more egotistic, so go back to that ego state, bossy, quite confrontational, all right? On the other side, somebody who manages that side of them well will be more assertive. Being assertive is actually the opposite to anger or aggression. You'll have a tendency to be a bit more ambitious, driven, you're generally kind of driving a strong will and being decisive, okay? Someone with low emotional intelligence, unfortunately, is easily distracted, okay? They genuinely feel as though they can be quite selfish, so we move back into that ego state again, being a poor listener, impulsive. Someone with the high emotional intelligence will be warm, enthusiastic, sociable, charming, quite persuasive, but in a nice way. Also, someone, you know, with low emotional intelligence will have a tendency to struggle and be really resistant to change. To be entirely honest with you, most of us don't like change, and we certainly don't like change out of the blue. But can I just say that if you're very concrete thinking, very rigid-minded, okay, you will, which also comes down to being stubborn, is what it's showing there. You will genuinely struggle to change and pursue and move and flow. You will actually have a tendency to be unresponsive as well. But however, on the other side of it, high emotional intelligence side, you'll have a tendency to practice more patience, be a little bit more stable actually in how you handle things, be predictable and consistent. Everybody loves someone who is consistent, and generally being a good listener. With low emotional intelligence will be critical. You will often criticize other people and be very judgmental all the time. Okay, you will have a tendency to be picky, fussy, sometimes quite hard to please, and a bit of a perfectionist. Now, can I just say that one way or another, some of us will have a good mix, everything that I've just mentioned here. Okay, generally a perfectionist. I'm somebody who is quite meticulous in things I do, and genuinely do struggle sometimes to step outside the perfectionist role. It's something that I have to consistently work at. So as you can see, there's no such thing as somebody who sits on the high emotional intelligence scale all the time, okay? But generally, we need to kind of understand that actually these are the things that you could genuinely work towards. So if you're somebody who answers quickly, maybe there's something you can do. Maybe genuinely you can do something to try and bring you down a little bit, make you more approachable, and genuinely be a good listener. So that gives you a bit of an idea on the difference between being or having a low emotional intelligence or a low EQ, as opposed to having someone who is sitting the high EQ all the time. Remember, this is a balance as well. We are only human, and at the end of the day, there is going to be times where, yeah, you are resistant to change, or you are stubborn, or you do show a little bit of an egotistical state. But the point of how quickly you can move yourself out of that. So in other words, if you recognise self-awareness that you're being like that, how do you move? Okay. So I'm going to describe to you some of the behaviours. Now, these behaviours have been condensed from lots and lots and lots of research and lots of different surveys and different experimental methods that have actually been used in order to try and assess someone's emotional intelligent behaviours. But I've actually broken down, and I've broken down 18 of them for you to understand. Now, emotional intelligence affects how we manage behaviour, navigate social complexities, and certainly make personal decisions to achieve positive results, okay? Or in other words, just achieve a good outcome. You have a robust emotional vocabulary. Now, every single student, every single private client that comes to me, I try to get them to use other words to describe themselves. Too many times I hear people just saying, I'm depressed or I'm anxious. They're two medical terms, okay? And I try to push people and try to get people to adequately describe and articulate actually how you feel. So under the overarching anxiety, you could be feeling excited, overwhelmed, generally a bit funny in the tummy. This is what I've heard children kind of tell me, nervous. These are different words. Depression. Actually, could it just be situationally low mood? Are you a bit worried about things? Have you been worrying about something last week? Generally, you feel as though it's getting your mood down a little bit. Are you actually feeling a little bit unwell, which is essentially impacting your mood? I get people to try and articulate. Now, somebody who works on their emotional intelligence will really try hard to have a higher emotional vocabulary, rather than just saying, I'm sad, I'm fine, I'm happy, okay? Unfortunately, only a few people can really truly articulate and describe exactly how they feel. In fact, well under half the population, and I actually found it was roughly 36%, adequately can explain how they feel. People with high EQs, massive emotions, or at least understand them, okay, and they can use an extensive vocabulary of feelings to do so. And generally, it's being able to explain exactly how you feel at the time in which you feel it. Can I also say, sometimes we're not 100% sure what we feel, but if you can go away and think about it and come back and articulate it, rather than turning around and say, I'm just anxious or depressed, genuinely, then, you can show that you've got a lot higher emotional intelligence than most. Curious about people. That's my line of work. I love people. I'm very curious about them. I'm curious about how they tick. Certainly, I genuinely do love working with individuals, and I love hearing everything about different people and what genuinely brings them to the forefront and what they work through and how creative people can be. Emotionally intelligent people are actually curious about everyone around them. The curiosity is the product of empathy. So weirdly enough, we go back to theory of mind, don't we? We go back to Tom. One of the most significant gateways, that is a huge way to having emotional intelligence. Let me just put it this way. If you could put yourself in someone else's shoes for just a moment to get an understanding as to where they're at, that shows real high empathy. The more you care about other people and what they're going through, the more curiosity you're going to have about them, okay? So generally, it is a significant gateway to having high emotional intelligence, is if you can actually show theory of mind, or more importantly, empathy. You embrace change. There's that word change again. Emotionally intelligent people are actually a little bit more flexible and are constantly adapting. We as human beings are built to adapt. We are not built to stay in one place. We are built to progress and consistently adapt to our ever-changing environment. You know your strengths and weaknesses. Emotionally intelligent people can genuinely turn around and say, I actually know what my strengths are, but I also know what I'm not particularly good at. Okay? Now remember, a weakness can be strengthened. It's always something to remember. They also know who pushes buttons and the environments that push their buttons, okay? And obviously they also know genuinely what they need to do in order to succeed. So it's pushing past those barriers or weaknesses, essentially. Certainly, I know my good traits, I know my bad traits, I know what I'm capable of. I'm also aware of I don't know everything, and I will stick my hand up and say, don't have a clue, don't understand that, or you clearly know much more than that than I do, please tell me because I'm really curious. So there's that curious. You're a good judge of character, okay? Most emotionally intelligent people and much of emotional intelligence actually comes down to social awareness. The ability to read people, know what about and understand what they're going through. Certainly having a good form of emotional intelligence is that ability to be able to read your surroundings, be able to read how you potentially fit in, and actually be able to judge a character and whether or not you feel as though they're good for you. Emotionally intelligent people, actually quite difficult to offend, can I say. If you've got a firm foundation, a firm understanding or grasp of who you are, it's actually quite difficult for someone to come along, blow your gate open, okay, and genuinely annoy you. Emotionally intelligent people are quite self-confident, they're quite open-minded, and they actually have quite thick skin. Good sense of humour, that's another one. You know how to say no to yourself and to others. There is the perpetual people pleasers out there. There are the people that feel as though they have to bend over backwards to say yes to absolutely everybody because they want to have to say no. But genuinely, if you know how to exert self-control, being able to say no comes quite easy. You delay gratification, avoid impulsive actions, okay? Research conducted at the University of California, San Francisco, showed that the more difficulty that you have in saying no, the more likely you are to experience stress, burnout, and even depression. Saying no is a major self-control challenge for many people. Certainly, I know how many hours I've got in a day, and I know how many hours I've got in a week. And genuinely, if I can't make something work, I will say no. Okay, it's not because I don't want to. I've been offered so many lovely things actually recently that I would jump to, but actually I just genuinely can't fit them in. So I've had to turn around and say, I'm sorry, I can't do that just now. And that genuinely protects me from high stress load and potentially burnout. You let go of mistakes. Emotionally intelligent people distance themselves from their mistakes, okay? But do so without forgetting them. By keeping their mistakes at a safe distance, yet still handy enough to refer to, they're able to adapt. There's the word adapt again, and adjust for future success, okay? We're aware of our downfalls. We might even be aware of our failures, things that we've perhaps done in life that we think, I didn't do that too well, or I didn't handle that situation particularly great. But actually, we're aware of it, but we don't hang on it. We don't let that underpin our very being, and we certainly don't underpin that identity. We know we're human. Error is to human. You also give yourself, and you give and expect nothing in return. Often people give, when someone gives you something spontaneously without expecting anything in return, this is a powerful impression. For example, you might have an interesting conversation with someone about a book, and then a later said person comes along with that book and says, oh, I remember you mentioned this book, so I've brought this to you. That actually builds really strong relationships. Unfortunately, there is people out there that they won't do something for you unless they're getting something in return. And again, that actually goes back to quite an egocentric state. Whereas if actually you are altruistic and you're somebody who genuinely does like to do other things for other people because you listen to them, that's actually a lovely thing. It's a lovely trait, and it's also a form of emotional intelligence. You don't hold grudges. Easier said than done, I know. But essentially, the negative emotions that come with holding onto grudges are actually, it is genuinely a stress response. Letting go of a grudge not only makes you feel better now, but it can also improve your health. If you're consistently holding activity towards a situation, towards people, consistently holding anger and it's inward, fortunately, it will eat away at you, to put a finer point on it. You become quite unstable, you can explode at any point, and generally your stress actually gets higher. So if you generally can wash away or push grudges aside and move on from them, it's far better for your mental health. You don't seek perfection. This is, I genuinely do put my hand on my heart and say this is something I do struggle with. And emotionally intelligent people won't set perfection as their target because they know it doesn't exist. Beings, by our very nature, unfortunately, are fallible. Okay, so in other words, we do fluff up from time to time, and there is no such thing as perfection. When perfection is a goal, you're always left with an sense of failure, and unfortunately, that will create a reduced effort. You end up spending just kind of procrastinating or laminating what you failed to accomplish in the past. Now, remember, letting go of grudges is something you need to do. But genuinely, that is something I can say hand on heart I do struggle with, and I have to consistently remind myself it can't be perfect. It can't be perfect all the time. You appreciate what you have, taking time to contemplate what you're grateful for, okay? Genuinely, you know, what you're grateful for isn't merely the right thing for you, it also gives your mood. I certainly encourage people to do 3 positive, good, or grateful points out of the day, the people that I work with. That actually genuinely changes or turns your negative filter to a positive filter. And it also reduces your stress hormone, in some cases by 23%. You disconnect. So people with some high emotional intelligence take regular time off the grid in a sign, and that it helps keep your stress under control and to allow you to live in the moment a little bit more. This is something we're all struggling with because at the moment we've all been pushed onto phones, we've all been pushed onto screens, and we've certainly got a higher amount of screen and phone work at the moment. When you make yourself available to your work 24/7, you expose yourself to a constant barrage of stresses. Now, I myself, again, struggle with this one. I am a workhorse, and I am fully aware of actually when I need to switch off. So essentially what I've done is I've created a very clean-cut switch off at 8 o'clock at night. That is my switch off. I do not respond to people at 8 o'clock at night. And genuinely, I feel much better for it. Forcing yourself offline, and even, dare I say it, turning off your phone, gives your body and mind a break. Studies have shown that something as simple as an email break can lower stress levels. Technology enables constant communication, 24/7 society, and an expectation to respond 24/7. It's extremely difficult to enjoy a stress-free moment away from work when your phone is constantly pinging away all the time. So know yourself. This comes down to self-awareness. Know yourself, set that boundary and step away. Get enough sleep. I know for those of you who've worked with me in the past, this is all I'm about is sleep, getting enough sleep. It's difficult to overestimate the importance of sleep to increasing your emotional intelligence levels and generally managing your stress levels. When you sleep, your brain literally recharges, okay? So if we put it at night, why are we not doing the same for ourselves? Shuffling through the day's memories and storing or discarding them. That's what brains do, that's what our brains do, that's what our dreams do. So that you can wake up alert and clear-headed, okay? Emotionally intelligent people are very, very aware that sleep is the pillar of health, okay? Stop negative self-talk in its tracks. Easier said than done, I get it. The more you ruminate on negative, however, the more powerful and the more power you can give them. They become very, very permit them. And if you start allowing them to sit there and ruminate and constantly run around like a hamster on a wheel in your head all the time, it's very, very difficult for you to become motivated, show good social skills, empathy, but also you're not regulating yourself if you're allowing the rumination to continue. So what can you do? 5 skills to help you kind of develop it, okay? Practice self-awareness. And what I tend to do, and what I mean by that, is check in with yourself. Check in with yourself more than once a day. How am I feeling right now? How am I responding to this? Somebody's just said something to me and I've suddenly felt as though I'm getting a little bit angry or annoyed at that. Self-awareness, genuinely practice it. Channeling your emotions well. So at the end of the day, there's no point slamming that cup a little louder or slamming that door a little harder, essentially, when you're angry, but you're doing it as the wrong person. If you genuinely have and feel as though you need to discuss, you need to get off your chest, and it's to a particular person about a particular situation, sit and speak to them. Channel your emotions appropriately and directly to where they need to go. Learn to motivate yourself. There's so many different techniques out there that we can use to motivate yourself. You know, whether that's exercise, whether that's the Pomodoro methods that I've mentioned with the 25-minute chunking bursts and studying, you know, generally phoning your friend and having a laugh down the phone with your friend. There's so many different things you can choose. If you're a cook, someone who likes to cook, someone who likes to bake, so many different ways you can actually adopt to help motivate yourself. Recognize emotions in others to create healthier relationships. Now, for those of you who've ever heard me talk about the positive psychology model, the center pin is about relationships, having a positive relationship with people around you, okay? Infuse your emotions with values. We all have them. We all have our own core values, okay? Genuine things that we hold to our core. And if something happened to these values, we would have a negative reaction towards them. And our emotional intelligence center pins around what we hold as human beings as values. Use your vocabulary. So there I'm going to use that again. Use your vocabulary to describe how you feel appropriately. So instead of "other sad," you can use words like "I'm irritable," "I'm feeling a bit downtrodden today," "I'm feeling a bit frustrated." Much, much better than saying bad or sad. So certainly how you can increase your emotional intelligence. I'm a big believer in being assertive in your communication. If you want something, ask for it. If you're not sure, ask again. If you feel as though you need greater clarification, ask. If something's bothering you, please do tell them. If you find a situation very difficult, please assert that in a good way, in an adult fashion, in a way in which other people will be able to respond to you and like for like. That also goes down to, you know, responding instead of just reacting to conflict. A lot of us will have a tendency to just react if someone were to come up and start shouting in our face, for instance. But if you chose to respond differently, what might happen? If you responded to try and keep calm and say, well, actually, hang on a minute, can we talk about this? Watch the other person defuse very, very quickly. That also assigns tit for tat or like for like behaviour. Some person's doing one thing and then you say, well, if they're doing it, I'm going to do it too. No, don't follow the masses, okay? Utilise active listening skills. Genuinely listen to what people are saying to you. That will allow you to respond more appropriately. Be motivated. Try to be motivated. I know at the moment it's really difficult. We're all just feeling flat as a pancake. Well, most of us are feeling flat as a pancake at the moment. But just little things, little daily routines, little bits and pieces that you like to do that give you just that little fluff of your feathers, is the way I would say, to try and motivate you. Practice ways to maintain a positive attitude, okay? And certainly a good work ethic. For those of you who are leaving the college this year and going out into the big wide world and looking for jobs, or potentially moving on to university level, etc., good attitude, or more to the point, work ethic, okay? That's going to stand you in very good stead And actually, emotional intelligence, in a nutshell, is going to stand you in good stead. It's going to allow you to navigate the rest of your life appropriately and hopefully successfully. As I said before, practice self-awareness. Learn to take constructive criticism. Even if someone has delivered the criticism not very well, learn to take it, learn to process it, and then respond. Empathise with other people. Genuinely stand in their shoes and say, how do you feel right now? I need to get a bit of a feeling on how you feel right now. That's my job through and through. I have to often put myself in the other person's shoes just for a moment, just to get a sense of where they're at. Leadership. Not being a boss, not dictating, not poorly managing, leading. Having those nice, strong, lovely leadership skills. The fact that I'm here to listen to you, I can communicate well, I can articulate well, I have a good positive attitude, and I'm also motivated. Be approachable and sociable. We all love an approachable person. We all love somebody that genuinely we can go up to and be able to chat to and tell them how we feel, what we're thinking at that point. Okay. So, thank you very much. I'm now opening myself up to any questions at this point, if you've got any, but I will just stop sharing there.
Right, that's us back there. Yep, that's it. That's the PowerPoint away, Vicky.
Oh, I will just come back onto my taskbar. There we go. Perfect.
Great. So yeah, thank you for that. I was jotting some stuff down there as you were talking, and I think a lot of what you were saying was ringing really true with me in terms of a lot of what our team and some of our partners deliver towards looking at the mindsets. You know, in terms of like keeping a positive attitude, that feeds into the kind of mindset that you have and keeping yourself going throughout this time. And I think one really key one that I picked up on was letting go of mistakes and not judging yourself, because I think we do have a tendency to judge ourselves really, really harshly. And I think being able to have that sort of kinder inner voice for yourself is really important, especially when you are trying to motivate yourself and keep going. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And it is. And for me, the big one for me is perfectionism, as I've said a couple of times through the presentation. I've got to battle almost every day with that particular type of thought process and pattern. And one of these things, emotional intelligence, is something that we have to consistently balance, work at, and develop. It's not something that we can just suddenly wake up tomorrow morning and boom, it's there. You know, it also depends on the situation. It depends where you're at, who you're with. You know, it's quite a vast subject. That's why it's so forever changing. You know, it really is a very changing subject.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of our students now, coming up soonish towards the end of their courses, I think it's really important for them to start kind of thinking about themselves in these ways. I mean, I know certainly what you were just saying at the end there about leadership skills. It's having that level of emotional intelligence to be able to understand who you are and how you fit into a team. What are your leadership skills? And then obviously for our students, thinking about how they can then start communicating that to employers and thinking about putting that into like a practical examples for employers and interviews. So a lot of really helpful stuff there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up interview skills, because that's exactly it. We make up our minds about people pretty much within 7 seconds. Okay, as soon as they kind of walk into the room. And then it's up to the person who's being interviewed to then prove them wrong for good measure. You know, but genuinely emotional intelligence is picked up on very subliminally, actually. Like I said, you could sit there with a doctorate, PhD, you could be the most cleverest person in the world, but genuinely, if you don't have what we would say any form of common sense, self-awareness, be able to empathise and genuinely socialise with people, it's going to be really, really difficult for you to work in teams and work with other people.
Yeah, we tell our students that all the time. You know, part of an interview is you trying to showcase to an employer how you and your personality is going to fit into the team, that you want an employer to visualise you working and fitting in with their team. Yeah, and really being able to recognise how you're coming across and how you fit into that, and how your skills are coming across and how you're displaying yourself and presenting yourself is really key.
Exactly. And it's one of those big things, but really boiled down, just having a bit of self-awareness, being able to motivate yourself. And I know it's really hard at this point in time.
Yeah.
Everybody's feeling that kind of lethargy that's kind of hitting everyone at the moment. Being able to just be social, approachable, show empathy, and obviously that self-regulation. Self-regulation, I think, is probably the hardest.
Yeah.
Being able to really regulate your emotions and recognizing I'm feeling really anxious right now. What do I do with it?
I think we're very good. We're very good at being able to recognise it in other people, but it's so much harder to recognise it in ourselves.
Yep, 100%. And I just think it's something, and hence why I say if you can try to work on your vocabulary, really describe how you feel, that then helps the other person really understand and really be able to empathise. So rather than just sitting there saying, I'm dead anxious, yeah, but why are you anxious? What's the situation around it? Are you actually overwhelmed? Are you nervous? Has something happened to make you feel like we need to kind of understand? So I always coach certainly students and clients that come to me with vocabulary as early as I possibly can. I try to say, well, let's see if we can boil this down a little bit more. What actually is the emotions you're feeling?
Yeah. It's so important, isn't it? Being able to articulate, and not just with your emotional intelligence, but everything, isn't it? So, yeah, Vicki, thank you so much for that. As we said, we've got the comments open if there are any other questions that come in. And as with our other videos, this will also go up on our YouTube channel in the next sort of hour or so you can go back and watch at your leisure. And I'm sure Vicki will be back again with something soon. It wouldn't be the same if we didn't have a monthly feature with Vicki.
I know, exactly, I know. But, I mean, here's another thing as well, and I'm just going to kind of put it out there. If ever there's anybody out there that's particularly interested in a subject, or they feel as though they maybe want to know something, that's maybe got a bit of a psychological underpinning, then please contact me. I would be more than happy to look at it, particularly if it's an issue or a theme or a pattern you've been seeing, consistently or regularly, or it's something you're actually maybe a little bit worried about, then do contact me. I'd be more than happy to delve into it, look into it, research it a little bit more, and certainly showcase it as much as I possibly could if it is genuinely something that seems to be coming up a lot.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, they can come through the comments with that, or your website information is also on all of our literature and things as well, so people can get through contact with you through there.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. Well, thank you very much, and much appreciate everybody who's watching today.
Yeah, thanks again, Vicki, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye, folks. Bye.
Bye.